Welcome to One with Him, where I am one with the Creator and one with myself. Today I want to pick back up in Escaping from Eden. We stopped on page 7 the last time, and I want to, like I said last time, I think I'm starting what chapter am I starting? Oh, so yesterday I read through chapter 9, so I'm starting chapter 10. And I want to read as much as I can to try to get you caught up to where I am, but if that doesn't happen, it doesn't happen, and I'm okay with that. But so yesterday, or the last time I came on with you, I was reading through chapter 1, and Paul was sharing how he came into the understanding of the story of creation and how it's written in the Bible. And he talked about how, he's a pastor or a priest, and that he was, he's preached through this and read through this account several times within his own congregation. And every time that he's read through it, he saw some anomalies in it. That's what he calls them. He saw some anomalies in it, or some things that just didn't add up in the account. But because of his schedule, he didn't have the time to, dig deeper. And as a result of a frisbee game that he was playing, he got injured, and it resulted in him having to be laid up for, I believe it was several months. And so he had the time to actually go through and investigate the anomalies that he had seen years and years and years, but never had the time to investigate. So we were in the midst of reading some of the things that he was asking questions about in his notes from Genesis. And yesterday we ended with Genesis 3:1, talking about the snake. So I'll go back and reread that and then move forward from there. Genesis 3:1, now the snake. And again, he's reading from the NIV translation of the Bible. Okay, who is this? Clearly, he's not a snake when he turns up. He is intelligent, he has arms and legs, and can speak human. He's a significant player, but he arrives on the scene without any kind of introduction or explanation. So what is he? He is not the Almighty, and he is not human. Has any other kind of being been named so far? Did I miss something? Did I skip the verse that explains this other kind of being? I wouldn't be the first person to miss the glaringly obvious. Come to think about it, almost every time Jesus quotes the Hebrew scriptures, he says, "Friends, look again." I think you may have missed something. The fact is, I had missed something, yet I was soon to find it hidden in plain sight in the very first verses of the book of Genesis. Genesis 3:16. In pain, you will give birth to children. Is childbearing a punishment or consequence? No, childbirth has occurred prior to this moment. In the flow of the story, painful childbirth is the only kind, and it comes after the humans gain conscious self-awareness and sexuality naturally. Genesis 3:23, and Yahweh Elohim said, "See, the human has become like one of us." Just a second. One of who? Who is God like that we humans would be like them? This isn't a literary trick. It's not a royal we or an author's we. This really is a plural. Genesis 4:14. I will be a restless wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me. Excuse me, who are these other people, these whoever's outside the garden who are going to kill Cain if they meet him? They can't be children of Adam and Eve. So who? Genesis 6-9. The animals went in 2 by 2, right? Apparently not. I can see that Genesis 1 and 2 put two creation narratives side by side. Genesis 6-9 looks like it has taken two flood accounts and woven them together. In the one version, the animals enter in pairs. In the other, they've worked out a more complicated system. Just a reminder that Genesis has taken from a number of sources and interwoven them to create the familiar version. Some texts tell stories of the Elohim. Others speak of Yahweh, the holy name of God, revealed to Moses in a later age. Scholars call this second narrative J, or more traditionally, Moses. I remember reading up at college on 18th century Bible scholars like John Ostruck, Karl Heinrich Graf, and Julius Wellhausen, who talked about the redactors, scissors and paste editors, who put Genesis into its current shape. These academics might not have entirely nailed it, but it's easy to see how J inserts the holy name into Genesis. Sometimes J replaces Elohim with Yahweh. For example, Genesis 11:6 and 7, and 18:21 through 19:1. Other times, he just adds the name Yahweh to Elohim in an Elohim story. For example, Genesis 3:22. I can see why he would do that. J is telling the reader to see the hand of Yahweh in the drama of the series. How did I miss the implication of this? Because the very presence of the post-Moses name of Yahweh in Genesis tells me that we are not reading the original version of Genesis. J isn't hiding what he's doing. When he adds the holy name, J shows to the reader that he is taking an even older story, which was probably a known story of written or oral tradition, and in plain sight, he alters it. So now I have to ask, what about the original version of these stories? What text was J working with? And if they weren't Yahweh stories, and if the Elohim in them were plural, were the original versions of the Genesis stories God's stories at all? Good question. Genesis 6:1 through 4. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. Wait a minute. If the flood destroyed all living creatures on the land, where did the Nephilims or giants go that they could reappear after the flood? Genesis 6:1 through 4 again. When human beings began to increase in number on the earth and daughters were born to them, the sons of God, bene Elohim, saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Who were the bene Elohim, often translated as sons of God? And what is different about them that their relations with human females produced giants? I have read somewhere that some commentators reckon bene Elohim is talking about local powers or kings or elites. If land barons were taking girls by force, that's certainly a problem. But that explanation makes no sense of their noticing the daughters of men, as if human girls were some kind of novelty. Neither would their relations produce giants, and would that really be cause for a catastrophic genociding flood? It doesn't quite hang together. Perhaps there's more to these prehistoric land barons than meets the eye. Maybe these prehistoric communities were being ruled over by something else. We're in the twilight zone here, because I don't think these bene Elohim are human. I know that some interpret bene Elohim as angels, but doesn't Hebrews in the New Testament rule that out? It says, "For to which of the angels did God ever say, 'You are my son. Today I have become your father'? Or again, 'I will be his father, and he will be my son'?" Maybe bene Elohim is a more figurative kind of expression. Could these entities be referred to as sons of Elohim in the same way we refer to sons and daughters of the Mayflower, or sons and daughters of the Revolution? In other words, perhaps it's not literal. Perhaps it's an idiom. That way, bene Elohim could mean the God-like ones or Elohim kind. Just as we have humans existing within humankind, maybe Elohim exist within bene Elohim. Whatever the bene Elohim are exactly, they're not God and they're not human. What they are has not been explained. For some strange reason, J assumes we all know about them. But from where? What other sources does J think we've been reading? Genesis 20:13. The Elohim caused me to wander from my father's house. If Elohim is supposed to be a general name for a god or a proper name for the one true God, Yahweh, then why does the word given get plural attributes and verb forms? In this text, Abraham uses a plural Elohim with a plural verb. I have read commentators say that Abraham wants to sound like a polytheist because he is talking to a polytheist. Really? And the editor didn't iron that out? I'm finding these plural issues even further into Genesis. Genesis 35:7 it says, "And there Jacob built an altar and called the place Bethel, because there Elohim appeared, plural verb, to him when he was fleeing his brother." Same in Genesis 11:7. Yahweh says, "Come, let us go down and let us confuse," plural verb, their language there. Genesis 22. Abraham's near sacrifice of his son Isaac has never made sense to me. Why would a loving God, the God who had promised Abraham a family line through his son Isaac, then ask him to mimic the absolute worst of pagan religion and sacrifice his firstborn son? A plural non-divine Elohim would make a lot more sense than Jay's edit of this episode. In this passage, Elohim and Yahweh actually play on opposite teams. It begins when Elohim tells Abraham to sacrifice his firstborn and only son. It happened sometime later that Elohim put Abraham to the test. Elohim said, "Take your son, your only son, offer him as a burnt offering." Abraham stretched out his hand and took the knife to kill his son. Isn't this how other gods proved they had exacted total, unquestioning obedience from their human subjects? The Greek islands, Phoenicia, the Near East, Mesoamerica were all areas where child sacrifice was expected by the local Elohim. What must those Elohim have been to have produced such inhuman behavior among their subjects? When Elohim demanded of Abraham, the stakes are high. Isaac is the son from whom the people of Israel are supposed to descend. Hence, Yahweh acts to prevent the killing. From out of the heaven the messenger of Yahweh shouted and called out to Abraham, saying, "Abraham, Abraham, do not raise your hand against the boy." If it was already well known, this story would pose a problem for Jay. There are too many gods in it. To turn it into a monotheistic text, Jay has translated Elohim to mean the same as Yahweh. He equates them by inserting the last word of the story's last sentence, Yahweh says. Now I know that you fear Elohim and did not withhold your son from me. With this last neat addendum, Jay turns it into a monotheistic text. But by equating Yahweh with the Elohim who gave the felicital order, Jay changes the story from one of gracious divine rescue to a cruel divine test, and it makes the story a moral nonsense. How am I supposed to feel about a deity who commands unquestioning obedience, even to the point of being willing to kill your own children? Jay has turned it into a story with only one God in it, but in so doing, the God he portrays becomes a monster. All this makes me think about what happened to F.D. Maurice back in the day. Maurice was chaplain of King's College, London, in the 1850s. Then he published some papers questioning the morality of the traditional church doctrine of hell. He argued that eternal, conscious torment couldn't be the correct interpretation of Jesus' teaching because eternal punishment is so absurdly out of proportion with any human crime. An infinite period of torture for a finite crime is nothing but cruel and unjust. Maurice was sacked and accused of heresy. Strange because he didn't actually contradict anything in the official creeds of the church. The university said it was worried that Maurice would unsettle the theological students by putting a moral argument as a case for a theological position. What that really means is that Maurice broke 3 unspoken laws. Thou shalt not question the Almighty. Thou shalt not expect thy God to adhere to any morality a mere mortal could understand. And thou shalt not have compassion on people thy God wishes to torment or kill. They were more or less saying that if God can expect adherence to those 3 laws from Abraham, then he can certainly expect them of a King's College chaplain, or you or me. But if we don't question, expect, and have compassion, then we fail to notice if our God has become a monster. If you want people to never question authority, especially those speaking for God, then Jay's version of the near sacrifice of Isaac does the job. But haven't we just had royal commissions in the UK and Australia showing the horrible abuses that result from that kind of theology? If you want to forbid any moral evaluation of supposedly divine actions, then Jay's account suffices. On the other hand, and if we're looking for an undistorted image of God, then the current version of Genesis becomes something we have to avoid or explain away. Now that you've eavesdropped on my notes, you'll understand the wrestle I found myself wrestling. Everything hinged on this enigmatic and anomalous word, Elohim. As I continued to walk through the pages of Genesis, I could see that every time Elohim and Yahweh are equated, there is a kind of moral distortion that takes place, and the devout reader is forced to excuse ways that appear lower than ours, not higher. I began to wonder if the apparent morality of God would lift consistently if we were to re-pluralize our understanding of Elohim. These were exactly the kinds of questions my library of commentaries liked to avoid, noting only briefly, explaining away unconvincingly, and moving on swiftly to easier points. So I decided to look to the historic Jewish commentators for a longer view. I reckon these guys must have a couple of thousand years advantage on the Christian commentators and presumably have a few more conclusions up their sleeves. I soon found Joshua ben Levi writing in the 3rd century AD and addressing the mystery of the biblical conversations among the Elohim. He said, quote, "With whom did God take counsel? With the works of heaven, he took counsel." End quote. A generation later, Rabbi Ami concluded, quote, "He took counsel with his own heart." From Midrash Rabbah, Genesis 8:3-1, Jacob Neusner. Okay, but that doesn't explain in the image and likeness of us, or humans have become like one of us. The Aramean commentary of the Targum of Palestine, otherwise known as the Targum of Jonathan ben Uziel, proposes that the appearance of plural Elohim doing the work of creation implies God acting in cooperation with a heavenly council. This council compromises himself and a number of powerful angels, whom God must have created without mention on the second day of creation. In Genesis 11, when Elohim says, "Let us go down," the commentator proposes that God must have been addressing the 70 angels who stand before him. Okay, but there's no mention of the creation of this body of angels in the text of Genesis. Wouldn't that be an odd omission? Though it appeared to leave significant questions hanging, the Targum of Palestine pointed me to a phenomenon in the Bible that somehow I had never really noticed before. I must have read it and just dismissed it as a creative flourish rather than anything real. I'm talking about the Heavenly Council. Once you look, the Heavenly Council evidences itself in many pages of Scripture. For instance, El takes his stand in the divine assembly. Surrounded by the Elohim, he gives judgment. Psalm 82:1. Who in the skies can compare with Yahweh? Who among the bene Elohim can rival him? God, awesome in the great assembly of bene Elohim, dreaded among all who surround him. Yahweh, God of armies, who is like you? Psalm 89, 6-8a. I saw Yahweh seated on his throne with the whole array of heaven standing by him, on his right and on his left. Yahweh said, "Who will entice Ahab into marching to his death at Ramoth in Gilead?" At which some answered one way and some answered another. A spirit then came forward and stood before Yahweh and said, "I will entice him. I will go and be a deceiving spirit in the mouths of all Ahab's prophets." 1 Kings 22, 19-23. One day when the Bene Elohim came to attend on Yahweh, among them came the accuser, Job 1-6. The word accuser in the Job passage is often translated as Satan. However, the word appears here not as a name, but as a descriptor noun with a definite article, i.e., the accuser. Nevertheless, The presence of an accuser among the Elohim, apparently as a member of the heavenly council, is something that must raise an eyebrow or two. I was going to have to return to that later. Joining these dots really had me scratching my head. How could I have read so much and yet missed so much? This was new to me. Here in the Bible is a heavenly council, populated by a diversity of entities, not all good, at least some of whom are spirits, and who are all Elohim kind. That's an interesting council. After a time surveying the various behaviors of the word Elohim, I began to wonder if in the Bible we are seeing not just a word with a diversity of usages, but a word in transition. What I mean is, words change their meanings over time. A classic example from monastic history is the word chapter. Originally, the chapter referred to the portion of the monastic constitution which would be read once a week at a special gathering of members in a special assembly room. After a while, chapter came to refer to the assembly room in which the constitution was read. After another while, chapter came to refer to the group of people assembled in the room to hear the constitution read. Still, later, chapter came to mean the local gathering of any association of people. So today, if you read the word chapter, to know what it means, you will need to let the date and context tell you which incarnation of chapter you're reading about. And to know why a group of people is called a chapter, you will need to know what it meant way back in the beginning. Could it be that in the century spanned by the books of the Bible, we are watching the word Elohim make a similar journey? Perhaps the obvious is staring us in the face. The word is a plural form. So then, what if in the beginning, before it became a proper name, Elohim was simply a plural word? If we read it in that way, then without modifying the text one jot or tittle, we could say that in Genesis 1, Elohim doesn't have a heavenly council. Elohim is the heavenly council. I'm going to read that again. If we read it that way, then without modifying the text one jot or tittle, we could say that in Genesis 1, Elohim doesn't have a heavenly council. Elohim is the heavenly council. If we read Elohim as a simple plural, then the use of the word for other gods is no problem at all. The verses which accompany Elohim with singular verb forms would then indicate moments where Elohim are being referenced as a group or a collective. For some real firepower in the Department of Biblical Translation, I turned to Dom Henry Wansbrough. Dom Henry was the supervising editor of the New Jerusalem Bible, one of the best Bible translations for the way it handles the names of God, and its superb scholarship and thorough footnotes to help the reader probe further. Dom Henry is a gracious man and a deep thinker. He wisely observed that a Hebrew plural form might sometimes operate as an abstract or a collective noun, like royalty, divinity, nobility, or management. That might go some way to explain why both singular and plural verb forms and attributives accompany Elohim in different biblical texts. He pointed out that no one is ever really sure of the correct syntax with a collective noun. Royalty is always getting itself into trouble. May be correct, but it sounds off. Royalty are always getting themselves into trouble is technically incorrect, but might work better in terms of understanding the sentence. This might be enough to forgive the grammatical glitches around the word. However, this explanation only serves to re-emphasize that in Elohim, we are not looking at a simple singular. A plurality is still implied. So I am going to stick my neck out and say that the presence of the plural for Elohim clues us that the sources of Genesis emanate from a worldview that believed in plural Elohim. So how should we translate it? Turning to etymology, the root meaning of Elohim is either powers or powerful ones. Some commentators argue that powers must refer to the superlative attributes of the Almighty. But just as a phrase like the powers that be evokes in our minds a plurality of people who hold power, so can we read Elohim as indicating plural entities. powerful ones. This reading of Elohim as powerful ones is also more consistent with the way in which I am pluralizations work in any other context. For instance, in Hebrew, a kruv is a cherub. Kruvim are many cherubs, not the various superlative qualities of cherub kind. Reading plural Elohim as plural entities also makes much better sense of phrases indicating plural description and plural behavior. I mean phrases such as let us make, in the image and likeness of ourselves. Humans have become like one of us. Let us go down and confuse their language. In such moments, we are genuinely eavesdropping on conversations among the powerful ones. I would argue that in earlier mythology, which spoke of a heavenly council, a group of Elohim has been redacted by Jay and colleagues to harmonize the Elohim stories with the stories of Yahweh. However, rather than create a harmony, the redactors have sown dissonance and moral confusion into our reading of the Bible ever since. Now, I think it's fair to say, devout Jewish and Christian believers, myself included, have often struggled with the idea that the book of Genesis might be an altered version of someone else's book. Theologians have often contorted themselves to avoid the obvious question thrown up by these plural forms. Certainly, as I made my way through the commentaries and books of theology adorning my bookshelves, I found that my questions were met with no more than a meager sentence or two before the authors would anxiously hurry away onto more confident ground. One day I turned to a voluminous work with the modest title, The Theology of the Old Testament, published by T&T Clark, edited by S.D.F. Salmond. In it, the theologian A.B. Davidson writes this: in contrast to man, angels belong to the class of Elohim. It might be interesting to contemplate the question of how the same name Elohim came to be applied to God and this class of beings. Agreed. Good question. Then he goes on. Perhaps we should be satisfied with the general explanation that the name, meaning powers, is applied from the standpoint of men to all that is above man, to the region lying above him. Though the same name is given, i.e., to angels and God, the two are never confounded in Scripture. Perhaps we should be satisfied with the general explanation. I wasn't satisfied. The circle had not been squared. It fudged the question of how a unique, peerless, almighty God could in any way be regarded and named as one of a group. The more I was served up that kind of non-explanation, the more I felt that I needed to keep asking. What would happen if we were finally to concede that Elohim implies plural beings? And what happens when we translate the Genesis accounts that way? Of course, the story changes. But what made my mouth fall open as I went about the exercise is that the change that results is far from random. I found that it is like brushing revealer over invisible ink, because what surfaces, previously hidden in plain sight, within the familiar verses of the Bible, is the unmistakable thread of an even older narrative. It's a narrative that changes our understanding of what the Bible is and who God is. More dramatically still, it totally rewrites our understanding of who and what human beings are and where we have come from. Opening my eyes to a plural Genesis was like releasing the brake on a roller coaster, and I had no way of knowing where it would take me. That is the end of chapter 1. Be blessed with the reading that you heard, and I will see you next time. Peace and blessings to you all.